All right, today I want to talk about freedom of speech and why it's so important. I received a little bit of pushback on one of my videos stating that Trump more or less saved freedom of speech, and the criticism was around the fact that there are a lot of bad things about Trump, which I 100% agree with. I don't think we signed up for wars. I don't think that we've gotten a lot of the disclosures that we were promised. But at the end of the day, my argument centered around the fact that freedom of speech and protecting that right is the most important right in the United States and is more or less worth sacrificing other things. And in that video, I talked about how that was at threat due to the censorship regime that we found ourselves under the Biden administration. So what I want to do is I want to illustrate exactly why I have those beliefs. And the thing I want to show is in the UK, there are people, thousands of people, who have been jailed for what they have said on social media. And I'm not being alarmist about this. I'm simply showing you that although you may think certain things are more important, how an infringement on your First Amendment rights, the freedom of speech, could very realistically and negatively impact you. And the first clip we're going to look at here is a sentencing of someone who was just that in the UK and has been jailed for expressing anti-immigration sentiment on social media. So we'll jump into this clip, and I will just say right from the get-go, I cannot take this guy 100% seriously with his silly wig on. I don't know why they do this, but it is hard for me to take him seriously, even though this is a very serious matter.
Problems in the country. You went on to say that you did not want your money going to immigrants who, quote, rape our kids and get priority, end quote. This offence is so serious that an immediate custodial sentence is unavoidable. Would you stand, please? The sentence...
And just before we get to the sentence, which is also insane, just that statement that he made on social media, which is just, he doesn't approve of the immigrants here, they're, molesting children or whatever, right? Okay, so yes, he said the things, but how is that any different from what we would say, or not we, but like your unhinged aunt or uncle would say on social media? Like, do you really want your aunt or uncle to be locked up in jail for some stupid comment that they made on social media? Or if you have some sort of dissent against the government, say you want to call out war crimes in Gaza, or you want accountability for Jeffrey Epstein. Like, imagine if saying either of those things on social media was deemed against the government's interest, and so you get locked up in jail. Like, is that a world you want to live in? That is why freedom of speech is the most important freedom and right that we have in the United States. Because without it, you have no way to speak up against the government. And although you might think other things are more important, and we need to protect against fascism, and Donald Trump is a bad person, at least he's not cracking down on freedom of speech. And although it wasn't that extreme, what was going on during the Biden administration, guess what? It leads down a dark road. And as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And although you might think it was okay to censor people speaking up against vaccines, or censor the Biden laptop story, or any other number of things that were being censored, well, guess what? when the table is flipped and it's your speech that you believe in, things that you think are important, being censored, now how's that going to work out for you? You're going to flip your shit, and for good reason. So that is the point of freedom of speech, is to protect all speech. That is why it's the most important. And it especially applies to speech that you don't agree with.
The sentence that I pass has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty plea. The sentence is one of 20 months imprisonment. You will serve up to 1/2 of your sentence in custody before you are released on license.
And just to point out how insane that is, so he's literally sentenced to almost 2 years because of a social media post. Do you want that happening here? Imagine you post on social media in your story, stop the genocide in Gaza. Well, guess what? Our government is pretty pro-Israel. Do you want to spend 2 years in prison for that? I don't think so. Like, people just need to actually think about what the ramifications are when they're saying, oh yeah, it's not the most important. I don't understand why you're making a big deal about this. Because it is the most important, and censorship was happening. They literally created a ministry of truth and then reversed course once they got enough pushback and blowback about that decision.
Fail to abide by the conditions of your license, you can be returned to prison to serve some or all of the remainder of the custodial term. The victim surcharge will apply, and I will make a collection order. Please take him down.
The next clip is basically seeing how in the UK they're talking about the censorship of social media to show that it's not being alarmist. No, this is something that is very real. And again, try and imagine this happening in the United States.
And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth.
This is in relation to some comments that you made on a Facebook page.
You were witnesses saying, obviously, people, why are they over here, etc., we let them into our country, etc.
A woman has been arrested by Cheshire Police in relation to inaccurate information on social media.
Because someone has been caused, obviously, anxiety based upon your social media post.
Right. So even just the beginning of this, right, this is a short, but you have them basically stating that they have dedicated law enforcement looking through people's posts, identifying them, and rounding them up. You have the police actually showing up and confronting someone about their social media posts. And then you have here, I mean, just listen to the language. Because you made someone feel unsettled or upset, now you can go, your social media post made them feel that way, and now you're going to go to jail. Again, it just blows my mind that anyone would not think that this is the most important thing, is to prevent something like this from happening. Because then you have no recourse to stand up against the government and make any sort of change happen.
That's
not
why
his.
you've been arrested.
In Russia last year, 400 people were arrested for things that they said on social media. How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year? Take a guess.
I have no idea.
3,300.
Really? Arrested for what they'd said on social media?
Yeah.
My goodness.
In Britain. And we do.
And that's exactly the point. In Britain. So by all measures, as we currently have a conflict going on in Russia, against Russia, in Ukraine, well, guess what? Everyone thinks that they're the authoritarian regime. Well, Britain is even more authoritarian in their speech regulation than Russia is. And the only reason you don't know that is because of the fact that we, the Western, want to villainize Russia. Yes, by all accounts, I wouldn't want to live in Russia. You wouldn't want to live in Russia. No one in the free world would rather live there. But if we, again, do not protect freedom of speech and treat it as the most important thing on the ballot every single time, well, then it goes down a dark path. And you wouldn't, again, this is something that you wouldn't think of, that 3,300 people were jailed for social media posts. But guess what? That's the fact of the matter. And if you do not protect freedom of speech, this is what you end up with. And finally, I just want to wrap up these 3 videos with one that basically dives into people who have been affected in Britain for free speech. And I think it's very important to show you exactly what has happened and how it has manifested itself over there. And again, just to further illustrate why it's so important that freedom of speech, there's a reason why it's number 1, the First Amendment, because it is hands down the most important.
Is free speech under threat in the UK? With the rise of so-called non-crime hate incidents, arrests over grossly offensive memes, and the government's online safety bill threatening to clamp down on social media posts.
And just imagine that. Literally, they didn't even, who's to say that they even crafted it, but you just reshare a meme that you think is funny, repost it, and guess what? Now you're going to jail. Is that the kind of world you want to live in? Again, if it happens there, it can happen here. And although they were only reducing the amount of spread posts would get, well, the next step, what is the next step after that? And the next step after that? And where does that lead to? That leads to this.
Can you really speak your mind in 21st century Britain? To find out, I spoke to Harry Miller, a former police officer who has had several run-ins with the law over supposedly offensive online posts. Harry Miller, your name has become synonymous with people who have been dealt with the police because of their offensive tweeting. Can you explain to viewers exactly what's happened to you recently and also in the past in your relationship with the police?
They came to me because I tweeted about gender critical content. I'd famously retweeted what they described as a limerick. It wasn't a limerick, it was a piece of feminist doggerel. Nevertheless, somebody, don't know who they were, they decided that this had caused them great offence, and they contacted Humberside Police, and Humberside Police then contacted me. Essentially what they...
And again, look how minor this is. He literally retweeted someone else got so offended that they decided to contact the authorities. And it's not like he's some insane person, right? He is an ex-police officer. You'd like to think that he should have some idea of what is at least moderately lawful. Like he's not acting way outside the bounds of fringe harassment, and which we in the US, like swatting people and stuff like that. Yes, okay, that should be acted against. But this is literally just retweeting something and making someone uncomfortable.
They said was that even though I committed no crime, if I continued not committing crime, that could in some weird way escalate to crime. I don't understand the magic behind that. I never have done. Nevertheless, that's what they said.
Okay, so can you explain your High Court victory against the police? What happened there?
After the police got involved with me, I realised that this was a breach of my human rights, Article 10 specifically. So we took Humberside Police to the High Court. Weirdly, we won. When the police come against you because you have said something that is controversial, or because some trans person somewhere decided that they didn't like it, that when they take that trans person's moan seriously and they come and try and censor you, that is entirely illegal. And
what I'll point out is this was an incident from 2021. it has only gotten worse and worse and worse in recent years. So yes, he won, but you can see the police, the homicide police in Britain, took it so seriously that they came out and basically threatened him that if he continued to make statements, which, by the way, as he's stating, were anti-trans, which even liberals that I talk to cannot defend the like, you can't say anything against trans. Like, even they believe that, like, trans in sports and, like, these other things are completely insane and make no sense. And I'm sure, again, if I was in his shoes and just making that statement right here, well, then I could be swooped up and basically taken to prison for those statements. But the exact point that I'm making is that these claims, like, again, it's someone who's a snowflake and gets so offended at just someone's words that they don't believe in trans, well, then the homicide police come out and talk to him. And again, thankfully for him that this happened when it did, but as I've shown in the last few videos, it's just ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. So if it were to happen today, who's to say he would have got the court victory over it? He could just be thrown in jail for 2 years for making someone uncomfortable. And the thing that should be most terrifying about that is think about the most mentally unstable people that you know who get upset about anything that you say or anything anyone else says, even if you agree with them. Think about how upset they get if you're a Republican. Oh, someone attacked Trump. I'm upset about it. Well, they could call in anyone who attacks Trump, or vice versa. I called Biden awful. I called Trump awful. I've called both of them awful. Is someone out there going to call in and put me in jail for it? It's freedom of expression, and it's the most important freedom that we have.
Mr. Justice Knowles equated it to the Gestapo and the Stasi. He said, we've never had a Gestapo or a Stasi in Britain. The actions of homicide police came way too close for comfort, and we now have a precedent set in the High Court that when the police do that again, we can just tell them, no, 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 no.
In retrospect, looks really bad because yes, they're throwing people in jail for speech.
You say to people who don't particularly like you, don't like what you're saying.
I say tough. I really don't care whether you like me. There is only one question that needs to be asked. Are we on the right side of the law? It's absolutely immaterial whether you like us or whether you like our message. Providing we stay law-abiding, the police have no right whatsoever to interfere with our freedom of expression.
You may be wondering what exactly is the legal justification for arresting people over their tweets. I went to Lincoln's Inn to speak to Dr. Anna Lutfi, an equality and human rights barrister, to understand the law around freedom of speech and how it's under threat. So what actually is a non-crime hate incident?
That's an excellent question, Stephen, and I think it's one that you should ask Priti Patel, our Home Secretary, because I don't think anyone knows by this stage. We have policies that have been drafted and exist in writing, and if you go to the College of Policing website and Google non-crime hate incidents in the search engine, you'll find what purports to be a definition, but I mean, good luck with that. You could be a PhD in linguistics and make no sense of it. It's utterly incoherent. It's basically the idea that if somebody finds something offensive and they report it to the police as such, then that person hasn't committed a criminal offence, but they've committed a non-crime incident which has some consequences akin to having committed a criminal offence. Basically, in Orwellian terms, a non-crime crime. Will it be...
And that's the thing to think about when I say that it didn't go there during the last administration, but it becomes a slippery slope. Because the first justification is, oh, just silence it. But then if it gets out like a large enough platform, like people who can't really be silenced, right? Like if you think about like an Alex Jones or a Tucker Carlson or whoever, pick whoever your favorite talking head is. If it becomes large enough and they can't be silenced, well then they'll go after them with stuff like this. That's the next step. Because it's not enough just to silence you and I. You know, smaller creators, people who aren't even creators. Again, your crazy aunt or crazy uncle who just posts random garbage on the internet, it's not just enough to go after them, but then, okay, we've silenced them quietly, but then when larger, more high-profile people start talking, well, then how are we going to silence them? And that's when it begins creeping in. Because, again, it's not just enough to silence you and I. They want to, it's like if you give a mouse a cookie, right? That book where the mouse just keeps asking for bigger and bigger and bigger things. That's the same way with everything. If you give someone an inch, they're going to take a mile. And it may not happen all at once, but slow encroachment will continue to happen. And that's exactly the point that I'm making with this video, and then him talking to her, is that it's so broad and you can't actually tell what it is. They just write it in the broadest sense possible so that they can go after you and just slap that reasoning onto anything. And that's why I said, yes, that guy won in 2021, but would he win today with this law on the books? I don't think so. And that's what's so dangerous about it.
Recorded against your name, that would be at the arbitrary discretion of the police officer involved. Will it show up on a DBS check? It might not. Is it something that's likely to affect you negatively in your career as you apply for jobs? Possibly. These are all questions that go unanswered, and they very much rest on the individual case-by-case basis, which is not, as you may well appreciate, the basis for a sound democratic legal system. We are now living in a society where using social media puts you automatically at risk.
Human rights is
and that's another huge issue with it, is that when things are so vague, is it's left up to essentially each individual interpreter's interpretation. So like if the cop or a judge, imagine if they have a bad day. If it's not spelled out in black and white, well then they could just have gotten in a fight with their significant other and they happened upon your case on that day, and now guess what? Now you're in jail. Now you have something on your record. You can't get a job. You know, any of those consequences that they were just talking about, any of those could be applied to you for something completely outside of anything that you did. It's something that happened to them earlier that now it's affecting how angry they are or how upset they are that day, and now you get prosecuted differently. And that's not fair either.
Concept that should be applied equally to everyone. That's the whole idea of human rights. How do you as a human rights lawyer view these recent arrests and view these recent cases to do with causing gross offence, etc.?
What's important to understand about human rights is that the right evolved alongside the obligation. And one of the things that people forget when they talk about individual human rights is that they belong within a general constitution that brings about obligations such as obligations to enact scrutiny of law, obligation to make sure that law is proportionate, obligations to make sure that checks and balances are enacted. That's why democratic countries have constitutions. And human rights outside of that constitutional context mean nothing. Everyone can scream and shout that they have a human right, but without the constitutional checks and balances, we don't have human rights. And what really concerns me, for example, we've seen this spate of arrests where someone recently, and we're seeing more and more people arrested with reference to Section 127 of the Communications Act, which refers to electronic materials sent containing grossly offensive content. Now, there is a constitutional principle that no one seems to be observing here, which is the intention of Parliament. What did Parliament intend when it drafted the Communications Act 2003? It clearly had no intention of criminalising or quasi-criminalising anyone who shared a meme on Facebook. Because when it was drafted, the concept of Facebook memes was not a structuring principle of...
And yeah, that's exactly right. Because, I mean, just imagine memes that you would share with your friends or family, right? I could probably think, you know, a lot of mine are a little bit more lighthearted, but sometimes, I mean, imagine I sent a meme that is critical of the current administration or something, and if they have laws that are so vaguely, and that's what they do, they're just going to make it incredibly vague, and then you're going to get swept up, if not now, then in the future. And that's the thing, is you put these laws in place, and you are saying, okay, it's totally fine to censor this speech. Well, again, eventually it comes full circle, and now your speech is the one being censored. And you can go to jail for sharing a meme that is critical of Trump, or claims that he has small hands, or repost the South Park, Trump has a small PP. Like, these things are entirely possible. And again, thankfully not, and we have seemed to correct and go in the better direction for our country. But if we continue down the path that we were going on, again, I don't know how anyone cannot imagine a world where something like that would happen, especially criticizing someone who has authoritarian ideologies that he fantasizes about, you know, when he's, oh, Putin, like, yeah, he's my friend, look what a strong guy he is. If you don't think these systems, if these systems were already in place, that he would not have such thin skin as to come after you, especially in, because he used to just kind of let it roll off his back and like rip criticism back at them and then just keep on his way. Now he gets very upset about these types of things, where he's, oh yeah, I'm going to sue South Park or whatever. And so when those types of things, like, again, all you need to do is wait a long enough timeline and these things will come for you, 100%.
The legislature. So we're in this situation now where 21st century culture wars are being invoked in the interpretation of parliamentary statute. And that gives rise to a total, again, Wild West scenario where human rights are what anybody says, and it's just a question of whether an arbitrary decision maker will act in your favour or not.
The government's long-awaited online safety bill has also come under scrutiny from free speech campaigners. This new law, if passed, could have serious consequences for social media companies when it comes to regulating their users' content.
And this is another almost completely separate issue, but a big problem is companies having to capitulate to other countries. And there's two things with this. There's basically two options that these companies have. Either A, regulate all speech around basically their global platform. So allow there to be a global platform, but then regulate to each individual country's laws, right? So that, imagine I posted President Xi of China is famously, he hates being compared to Winnie the Pooh. So imagine if any time you posted even if you just wrote Winnie the Pooh, President Xi looks like Winnie the Pooh, you would immediately get censored on the platform. That's the global platform where you can still interact with people, but whatever you post that another country sees as an infringement or even just something they don't like will get censored. So in this scenario, and this is just, imagine if this was the scenario, Israel, you can't criticize Israel, like Israel and Gaza right now. If you say that Gaza is a genocide, your content will be censored, and it will get no one will see it. It will get no traction. It literally, you're screaming into the void. So like, is that a world you want to live in? Or 2/B is every single country gets its own little instance. So instead of my video being able to be seen by anyone in the world, only people in the US can see my video because it would infringe on Britain's laws, it would infringe on China's laws, it would infringe on whoever. If I say anything negative, like if I'm advocating for free speech, well, China can't have that, and Britain can't have that. So instead, Google says, your video, you can have all the free speech you want, but only to Americans. What kind of a global system, and I'll just say friendship, right? It sounds kind of corny, but think about it this way. What kind of, I think countries get along when you end up interacting with and playing with people who are from other geographically different locations. I think that's just better for the world, because then you get an understanding that, hey, I don't hate the average Chinese person, right? Because I have a friend that's Chinese and some Chinese people are cool. And if you remove that ability for people to interact with each other and build relationships, then what are we doing? You know, I think that is also a bad scenario. And that is the problem with what is going on and was just talked about here, is that it forces companies into one of those two scenarios. And I think both of those that's the danger of having to capitulate to countries that are becoming more and more authoritarian. And it's so frustrating to see companies doing this, because I know people in the UK that I really like. And my last job, I was found from a recruiter in the UK. And so, yeah, when these things are happening, and when freedom of speech in America is being affected by other countries, I think it needs to be, yes, other countries can do what they want, but I think that there are negative side effects that we as Americans still experience, even if it's not our country that is directly infringing on our speech. Even if these global companies have to capitulate to other countries' laws, well, there's still, I think, negative effects on the average American.
To Victoria Hewson of the Institute for Economic Affairs to explain the consequences of the bill.
The Online Safety Bill will affect freedom of speech in a couple of different ways. First of all, it creates some new criminal offences, some new speech offences to do with harmful communications. Now, on the positive side, it will repeal the existing communications offences under the Communications Act 2003 and the Malicious Communications Act. They will both be repealed, which is certainly very welcome, because they're both two very pernicious pieces of legislation. Unfortunately, the new offences that have been constructed to replace them could actually end up being even worse.
And of course they're going to be worse. Like, they're not going to, again, it's a slippery slope, and they never give up ground. It's always just continuing to move in one direction. And that's why you can't let it happen even a little bit. Because, again, now it's just in the US, now it's just throttling posts. But what comes after that?
Because they are based upon the concept of causing harm to a likely audience. And harm in the harmful communications offence is defined as severe distress. And so anyone who makes a communication, which could include a WhatsApp.
And to that point, do you want the most online, mentally unhealthy, insane people to be able to say what is hurtful to them or not? Like, people who spend all their time online already have a very fleeting grasp on reality. Do you want them being able to have a direct impact on your life? I would say no. That would be very concerning to me.
That message, or it could include a posting on Facebook or Twitter or any manner of these kinds of fora. If they do it intentionally, knowing that there might be someone who might possibly receive it, who would be distressed by it, that will be a criminal offence.
So it's not just the new offences that have been created, but there's also been controversy over this idea of saying something that's legal but harmful. Can you delve into that issue?
For the biggest online platforms, they will also have to put new systems in place to deal with what's this new thing that's been created, priority content that's harmful to adults, I think is the technical term for it. And they won't strictly have to take it down. This is how the Secretary of State has been defending this measure, saying no, we're not.
Which again is even worse, because you're just being throttled. And if no one can see it, then what's the point of even putting the content out there. Like, you put it out there to be consumed. At least I try to, right? That's the point with this channel, is I want to put things out there to try and get people to see why I think the way I do about certain things. Because I think I have a fairly well-reasoned viewpoint on things, and I give things a lot of thought before I have my opinion on them, and I voice my opinion. So in the fact that I have any ability to influence someone and get them to think critically about something, that's what I want to do. And if you're going to throttle that, and that's not for all content, but no one should be, there's a reason why you shared something. Even the most offensive, whatever, there's a reason behind why you shared something. And I don't think anyone should be able to tell you that that is invalid. I might not agree with what you're sharing. I might find it offensive to me, but I'm not going to tell you you can't share it, because at the end of the day, it's just words. And if I'm so offended by your words, well, then I don't care what, in this instance, my opinion is. I wouldn't care what my opinion is, or whoever. Like, if someone is so offended by something that I post in a video, well, I do not care what your opinion is anymore, because you somehow find it so offensive that my words, my opinion, my personal opinion, I'm not enforcing it upon you. I'm just saying this is the thing, that this is my opinion on something that's offensive to you. Well, then I want nothing to do with you. You're a trash human being, in my opinion, because you're trying to impose your beliefs and your morals upon someone else. And you're saying, I'm so offended that I can't even hear a dissenting opinion. That's exactly what the United States was founded on. And if you don't like that, go move to China or something. I don't know what to tell you. Move there and tell me how much better you have it. Good luck.
Forcing you to censor this kind of legal but harmful content. We just want you to be clear and transparent about what you're going to do with it on your service. And they will make a list. This Secretary of State is going to make a list of what comprises this new category of legal but harmful. And it's going to be things like health misinformation, which is a little bit worrying, to be honest, because we've seen a lot of things that were classed as health misinformation that actually turned out to be true. So already we've got some alarm bells here. But Nadine Dorries...
And you don't even have to go that far back. Literally COVID. Literally COVID. Like, how quickly everyone is forgetting. Oh, it turns out people are having heart attacks from these shots, from these vaccinations. How are you supposed... Again, it was covered up at the time, too. I literally couldn't even search negative side effects. So, like, yes, 100% to her point, is that really a world... Do you want to go in getting a vaccine thinking you're doing the right thing and you end up dead? Because no one was allowed to say, hey, some not great things are going on here. It gets silenced because money. Is that what you want? It totally blows my mind when people try and argue against free speech, even for throttling things like this. Any sort of impediment on free speech, I don't know what you're thinking.
And others will say, no, but we're not forcing people to take this down. We just want the platforms to be clear and honest about what they're doing with it. But can you seriously imagine any platform putting in its terms and conditions, yes, we carry legal but harmful content, and that's it, we're not going to do anything about it, it's up to you.
When looking in a broader sense, not just the Online Harms Bill, but all the other legislation that's used to go after people for online content, do you think that we have free speech in the UK?
It's a great question, because I suppose the answer is we have free speech as long as we don't want to say anything that's going to be too controversial or offensive. And that's technically not how the law should work. There's a law. And
exactly as I have said, all you need to do is wait long enough until the thing that you're saying is offensive. It always comes around. There's always a swing, left and right. And so whatever you think is, I'm totally protected, I can say this. No, you can't. All you have to do is wait 4 to 8 years. And that's the problem with these parties being so political and so basically polarized is that when you put yourself in either camp, everything the other camp says is just the worst. It's a crime against humanity. It damages me mentally. It is so traumatizing. No, it's not. No, it's not. And again, this is why I just can't take people seriously when they're so dedicated to one side or the other. If I ask you where you fall and you don't say in the center, let me describe my beliefs on each and every, ask me what you want my opinion on and I will tell you. Again, I just can't take you. You can give me a general alignment, but if you literally toe the party line, you're an unserious person. You're not just unserious, you're stupid. If you can't dissent on a single thing, then I don't know what to do with you. I'm uninterested. You're a wholly unintelligent person.
Long-standing case law from the European Court of Human Rights that says even, or perhaps especially, speech that is offensive or distasteful is protected speech. But in practice, we have so many laws on our books to do with hate crimes, inciting racial hatred and religious hatred, all of these kinds of speech offences. And actually in quite a sort of nannying moralistic way as well, where people are prosecuted for making mean jokes about Captain Tom, for example, or even, you know, I'm going to go out there and say prosecuting people for making extremely repulsive and distasteful jokes about something like the Grenfell fire disaster. I think we can all agree that that is morally repugnant, but should it be illegal? Should people get a criminal record for making distasteful jokes?
As more people are questioned by the police over their online comments, pressure is only rising not to share controversial opinions. After 12 years of Conservative rule, questions remain as to whether this government is committed to protecting freedom of speech.
All right, I think that pretty well illustrates my point, right? Those 3 videos, I think, do a very good job of showing what exactly is going on in the UK. Again, I think it's something that has not really been reported on here in the US, so it's totally understandable if this is the first time you're hearing about it. But I think it's something that's very, very important and is something that is becoming an issue, quite frankly. And I think given what happened during the Biden administration and the soft censorship that was going on during that time, I think it becomes a very slippery slope and could lead to hard acts of censorship, which you are seeing in the UK. I'm very perturbed about this kind of a thing happening, and I want to do everything that I can in this instance, bringing attention to it to show why it is so important to fight against this type of censorship, because it will continue to ratchet up and up and up, and things that, again, it was the founding principle of our country, well, now is going down a dark path, and freedom of speech is being infringed upon, and in my opinion will eventually become illegal. Anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you find my content interesting, drop me a subscription. It really does help the channel. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.